Mr. President, I want to start my remarks today by thanking President Trump, Secretary Rollins, Secretary Rubio, and Deputy Secretary of State Landau for their efforts in securing a new agreement with the country of Mexico to send much-needed water to South Texas. Now, this has been a long-standing problem. I remember years ago being in Mexico City when I was Attorney General of Texas, talking about getting the Mexican government to live up to their responsibilities under this treaty, which requires them to deliver water to the United States on a regular basis. But their habit has been to delay the delivery of that water till the end of the 5-year period of the treaty. And obviously, in the interim, Mexican farmers have the water they need to grow the crops they need to grow and leave Texas agriculture high and dry. But it's important that we get this water flowing again, because Mexico has repeatedly refused to comply with the terms of the treaty in a timely manner. We worked with the Biden administration. I remember talking to Secretary Blinken and introducing legislation, talking to my colleagues across the aisle about coming up with some carrots and sticks that we might be able to use to get Mexico to live up to its responsibilities, but the Biden administration really wasn't particularly interested in solving the problem. I've been working here in the Congress, as have my colleagues both in the Senate and the House, particularly our Texas delegation in the House of Representatives, to get them to live up to their responsibilities. And I think we've come to realize that the current treaty, which was signed back in 1944, has become obsolete, that we need some interim measures and metrics to ensure that there are regular annual water deliveries for Texas and our agricultural industry. But yesterday's announcement was an important step forward to doing just that. And again, I thank the President, the Secretary of Agriculture, the Deputy Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State for their efforts to secure this important and long overdue payment of water to South Texas. Mr. President, we were all back home in our states during these last 2 weeks, and one visit I made during this trip back home was to visit a Fort Worth site of a company called MP Materials, a facility that's aptly been nicknamed Independence. This impressive plant is the nation's first fully integrated rare earth metal, alloy, and magnet manufacturing facility. Not only is this the first of its kind in America, it's the largest producer of rare earth minerals in the Western Hemisphere. Their mine is in California, but they actually process them in Texas and turn them into magnets. And you may wonder, what's the big deal? Why are magnets so important? Well, if you think about it, magnets are involved in almost every type of electric motor, whether it's for commercial applications or national security applications. And in particular, MP Materials produces these magnets for General Motors, as well as essential components for various vehicles, drones, robotics, electronics, aerospace, and defense systems. Now, when we talk about critical minerals, there's a lot of confusion because it sounds pretty technical, but it has real world impact on everyday Americans, on our economy and on our national security. From our iPhones to the cars we drive, even our washing machines. Without these magnets that these minerals produce, society would come to a screeching halt, as dependent as we are on electricity and everything driven by electricity. Naturally, the work of this company, MP Materials, has implications not only for the Texas economy, but for our entire nation's national security. It reminds me a little bit of the epiphany we had post-COVID, that we were almost completely dependent on Asia for advanced semiconductors. And the fact that America, that had once held a leading role in manufacturing these advanced semiconductors that basically run everything with an off and on switch, that we'd become almost entirely dependent on Taiwan and South Korea to produce these advanced semiconductors. Again, COVID woke up a lot of us with regard to the vulnerability of our supply chains, and certainly advanced semiconductors was one of those. The rare earth mineral processing is another. The ability to produce critical minerals and process them here at home is a critical step to safeguarding our supply chains from the Chinese Communist Party. There are risks from relying substantially on our greatest strategic adversary, China, for the production and manufacturing of these resources. America used to have dominance in this area, but not unlike semiconductors and quantum computing. In fact, we were, at one point, the largest producer of rare earth elements in the world from the 1960s until about 1985. That was when China entered the picture and began ramping up their rare earth mining and processing capabilities. As a result of a 40-year strategy that included both domestic investment and trade barriers, China has usurped our place as the global leader in producing rare earth elements. But they didn't stop with domestic manufacturing. China has also been aggressively buying up critical mineral facilities in countries around the world in order to increase their dominance in the market. By 2010, they'd become the source of 85% of the global rare earth element supply and the source of 95% of the processed rare earth elements. This is a storyline that's become all too familiar regarding a plethora of American industries that have been offshored to China and done nothing to make us safer and more prosperous. In fact, the opposite is true. It's made us less safe and threatened our economy as well as our national security. At this time, China is involved in what some might call old-fashioned mercantilism when it comes to these critical minerals. They will do anything to preserve their near monopoly on processing these rare earth minerals that are vital to everything in modern life. My tour of the MP Materials factory, I learned that basically China will give away their product rather than have to compete on a level playing field, mainly to undermine any effort for us to establish an alternative processing operation here in the United States. But the good news is that this rather grim picture does not have to be where the story ends. The Trump administration has made securing our supply chains for critical minerals a top priority, and I'm one of their strongest partners in this effort. American companies with Texas presences like MP Materials have been a critical part of that strategy, and it is a step in establishing a stable and secure alternative to China to supply these minerals to industries and manufacturers across our nation. In fact, MP Materials has recently halted exports of rare earth concentrate to China and accelerated their production in the United States. But here's where I think most people miss the real story. Yes, there's been a lot of written about critical minerals, including rare earth elements, but the focus is not so much on mining these essential elements or materials, it's actual processing them that's turning them into functional units. And China does about 90% of that in the world. So I'm grateful to the President for recognizing the importance of this issue. Last week, he signed an executive order on unleashing America's offshore critical minerals and resources, which directs the Secretary of Commerce to expedite the reviewing and permitting processing to mine in deep seabeds. In addition, the order directs the Interior Secretary and the Energy Secretary to work together to identify new partnership opportunities with the private sector and allied nations to continue developing these critical mineral capabilities. This executive order will dovetail with legislative efforts that we're working on here in the Senate. I've introduced legislation that would address this issue called, unsurprisingly, the Critical Minerals Security Act. This legislation would require the administration and subsequent administrations to create a process to assist U.S. companies wishing to divest from critical mineral operations in a foreign country, to identify a purchaser who is not an adversary. With China as eager as ever to buy up all the critical mineral operations in neighboring countries, if an American investor is looking to sell their interests in critical minerals, my legislation would help them avoid selling their assets to a foreign adversary, particularly to China. This legislation also directs the Secretary of the Interior to create a strategy to collaborate with our allies and partners to advance mining, refining, separation, and processing technologies, as well as sharing our intellectual property. We know there's one thing that China hates to do. It's to play by the rules. They refuse to do so. They are absolutely ruthless in stealing American ideas and technology whenever they can. This legislation will help direct our allies and partners to get ahead of them by working together to share resources and intellectual property to develop and process these critical minerals. It's no secret, Mr. President, that China poses the greatest strategic threat to the United States and indeed to world peace. They're working in concert with other adversaries of the United States today to try to undermine the West, including the United States. It's imperative for the United States to ensure that our supply chains for rare earth minerals are secure. From iPhones that allow us to send and receive emails and text messages, to cars that we drive to work or taking our children to school, even the drones that now increasingly deliver our snail mail, rare earth minerals are critical to modern life. Again, very analogous to what advanced semiconductors were proved to be in recent years. President Trump has brought this issue to the forefront of our national conversation, and I'm eager to take up that conversation and to work with my colleagues here on both sides of the Capitol, on both sides of the aisle, to deal with this critical vulnerability. And I look forward to working with him and all of our colleagues to help make America great again by ensuring that America once again leads the world in not just the mining, but the refining and processing of these critical minerals. Mr. President, I yield the floor.